You're listening to the podcast for all of the news, notes, and breakdowns for your Ohio State Buckeyes. This is Sons of the Shoe with Nick Wilson and Spencer German.
Hey guys, Nick Wilson, Spencer German, Sons of the Shoe rides again, and we've got plenty to get to on today's episode. Ohio State spring practices starting up again after spring break. Oh, but wait, there's no running backs coach. What do we do there? Some things that we don't love coming from the NFL as well about one of our favorite Buckeyes of all time. But follow Sons of the Shoe, if you would, anywhere you get your podcast. Apple, Spotify. Stitcher doesn't exist, but if it did, you could follow them there. 923thefan.com, the free Odyssey app. Have I mentioned Apple? Follow Sons of the Shoe wherever you get it. And as always, subscribe to 92.3 The Fan's YouTube channel. And please, 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 please leave your comments as well. We always love to see what comments you guys have. We tend to interact quite a bit on there. But Spencer, how you doing, buddy?
Pretty good. Getting ready for, my wife and I are talking about maybe going to the spring game. So for multiple reasons. Because I'm getting excited about Ohio State football, and it's only March, and we are deprived of it for another 5 months or so. So it's something to hold us over until we get to that point. But also because we do this podcast together, it's a chance to have some fodder for the show and talk about what all there was to take in and whether or not who stands out in this so-called quarterback competition that the Ohio State Buckeyes are having. So. That should be something coming up here that's pretty fun. But, just trying to get through the winter weather that seems to not want to go away, apparently.
My advice as a married man, when you're taking a trip that is a dual purpose, hey, honey, we both like Ohio State football. Let's go there. But also, maybe I want to, do some investigating, get to meet some people. Make sure you oversell the work component of this, so that whatever you end up doing, she's happy with. So if you end up spending like 70% of the time with her and 30% of the time grab assing with other media members, she'll be like, man, I can't believe he blew off the media for me. And then if you spend 70% of the time grab assing with media and 30% of the time with her, she'll be like, well, this is what I expected. That's my own. As a married man, I'm all about setting expectations so that you don't have to deal with blowback later. That's my professional opinion, both as a media member and as a husband.
I will take all the advice I can get because I think the professional versus family balance of those types of things is something that I'm still very much working on. So.
Man, I'm 38. My kids are 13 and 10. My wife and I have been together since I'm 21. I still don't have. I love when people are like, I've recently struck a much better work-life balance. And I was like, how? Because there have been moments where I have worked less, but the work has always been more than the life in the work-life balance. So I find new creative ways now to make sure I'm adding in life in between the work, right? In the mornings, making sure I make breakfast for my girls. Always, ask my wife, what's one thing I can do for you before work? I do my damnedest to get a little life into that work-life balance. And it always ends up being about 75-25, no matter how hard I try.
Yeah, I think that's the same problem I have, especially in the situation I'm in, which is my work is all kind of sporadic and all over the place. And I don't have just like a standard, okay, I know I'm doing this at this time. So, at a moment's notice, I have to run and go record something, or I have to run and go write a story. So that makes it even harder. But I think it goes to the line that people always like to say about I'm always constantly working on myself. So that's the best I can say right now.
Listen, I'm a work in progress, so yes. Please be patient.
We're a teenage girl's Instagram post. Yeah.
There's nobody else that's a work in progress. I've been working on myself, namaste, and day by day, I am getting better. It's like, F off. Listen, I am all for self-improvement. I am all for pushing yourself. I am all for trying to be a better human being. It's tough to then put it out there like, just so you know, I know that you know that I am working on myself. Like, oh my God, blow it out all of your asses. But that is a very cynical take on what is supposed to be an empowering thing. As we mentioned at the start of the show, it is the second week of spring practices. And I know, I mean, back in the first week, you covered this a little bit, but I got to just give the Columbus media a lot of kudos here because they are selling a fight on this quarterback competition. Now, if I remember correctly, when Will Howard was signed, it was, I mean, it's Will Howard's job. And then, they're going to compete. And now it's Will Howard's job and they're going to compete. Like the messaging has changed. And I think that's because we're in spring ball and we all buy into it a little bit more. I'm not sipping the Kool-Aid. If Will Howard doesn't get this job for any other reason other than injuries, you will have built your offseason on a flawed premise. I would be shocked if Will Howard wasn't the starting quarterback by the spring game, if not well into practice, at the very beginning of training camp coming up in July.
Yeah, and Ryan Day always drops the company line of everybody has to earn their job and nothing's just handed to anybody. And
somebody should have told that to Ryan Day.
Yeah, he was born on third base. No, so
that was just a cheap shot, by the way. I have no problem with him being the head coach. I just wanted to say something dickish.
So yeah, like I think I understand why they say that. I understand it's what you're supposed to say. I understand they're not going to necessarily go into any situation, spring practice or otherwise, and basically tell one of these kids like, you have no shot. They want them to work hard. They want them to do some things. But I mean, it's one thing for them to sell that to us as consumers of Ohio State football and fans of Ohio State football and supporters of the program and all this different stuff that they're doing this quote unquote quarterback competition. But I'm more interested in like what they're telling people internally. And my guess is, somebody like Julian Sayin transfers here and he understands what the situation is. And it sounds like, by all accounts, like Aaron Noland understands the situation where even after the signing of Will Howard, he was putting out there on social media, hey, I'm 2 feet, 100% in. I'm not going anywhere. I'm coming to Ohio State. You got Devin Brown talking about how, I'm not just going to run away and hide because they brought in this veteran quarterback that is maybe higher than me on the depth chart right now. Like, I'm going to try to compete. That's just who I am. So I think internally they have probably made it pretty clear like what their intentions are, or that, the job right now belongs to Will Howard or whatever. And maybe if somebody blows them away, they would change their mind. But I just feel like guys who are coming to Ohio State, especially recruits coming to Ohio State for that position specifically, I think they understand what they're getting into. I think they understand that you're going to Ohio State not only just to hopefully start, but to develop and become a player that can go off to the NFL and be really, really talented. And I think you sign on to that school knowing that it's about more than just, do I have the starting job? It's like you go into that knowing there's a development piece of this, and guys that are going to come to Ohio State, I think moving forward, they want that. Like, they are seeking that out in their recruiting process. They're not just going somewhere because, well, they're giving me the most money or whatever. And I do think the money's a factor. I'm not saying it's not. I'm sure Julian Sayin got a pretty penny to transfer to Ohio State. I'm sure Aaron Nolan got a pretty penny to come to Ohio State. I'm sure Will Howard took a decent payday to transfer here. But I still do think like there's certain schools that the development piece matters for, and Ohio State is one of them.
So what's interesting about what you're saying is I think everyone is driving off. It's a real competition because Devin Brown says he's going to try and earn the job. And listen, I think it's cool that Devin Brown has taken this philosophy. I think it's really cool that he's got this attitude of, I'm a Buckeye and I'm ready to be here. I don't know if that lasts through end of spring ball if he doesn't get the job, but I like what the kid seems to be about. But here's the reality. Will Howard is an accomplished multi-year starter that has won a buttload of games and really has the kind of dual threat capabilities. Again, he's not a true runner, but he is mobile. he has the leg up just from that standpoint. And for Devin Brown, like, man, he looked raw. He looked, and it's funny because during the Cotton Bowl, everyone was like, well, he's a pocket passer. And then he proceeded to not be a very good pocket passer in any of the games that I watched him on. So, again, I'm not trying to take a shot at Devin. My point is, I think everyone's driving, well, Devin Brown really seems convicted, so maybe we should take this seriously. I think that one's, I don't think that's the reason. Now, I think the more interesting battles are at the lower part of the depth chart. You know that I am part of the Keenholz kin, big Lincoln Keenholz fan, straight out of Dakota, or the Dakotas, and really where it becomes interesting is Keenholz versus Sayin versus Aaron Nolan, because I think depending on how this season goes, who maintains the edge on second or third quarterback, I think that really matters. And I think that could set up what the next 3 years look like at Ohio State from the quarterback standpoint.
Yeah, and I want to be clear too, because I specifically sort of alluded to the younger guys on the depth chart. I think, and that's where I think like the message has been kind of sent. Like, I think they're still selling it as an open competition and guys are going to go out and compete. But I think that those guys saying Nolan, like, I think they know it's more than likely that Ohio State's going to try to let them nurture and sort of sit for a year and learn before they get a chance to start. And I just think that's just kind of obvious based off of what Ohio State generally does with their younger quarterbacks as well. Like, we've seen it all the way through, like CJ Stroud had to sit for at least a year. The list goes on where you're not just getting the starting job as a freshman. So that just seems so rare that I think those guys probably understand like what the situation is. But yeah, I do think for somebody like Devin Brown, he is probably being sold like, hey, if you come take the job, then you come take the job. And that's why he's trying to compete for it. And I do commend him for that. I also said a couple weeks ago, Nick, one of the episodes that you were out for, I mentioned that, if it gets to a point where because the whole thing was, he was basically saying, I see the fodder on social media, people being like, well, you're not going to get the job, why are you here, and blah, 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 and you should just transfer. And his whole point was, I'm not just going to run scared because I'm faced with some competition. That's not me. And I said, like, if I commend him for that, and I appreciate the fact that he's willing to sort of duke it out and do this thing, so good for him. But then I also said, if it gets to the end of the spring and he still isn't a starter and he kind of sees the writing on the wall, I'm also not going to hold it against him if he gets to a point where he's like, all right, I do want to go find another opportunity somewhere else because I think I can start somewhere, even if it's not at Ohio State. But yeah, I mean, I think down the depth chart all the way through, like it's still an interesting battle, whether it's for the top spot, which we think is going to probably end up being Will Howard, or if it's going to be guys lower on the depth chart of like who sort of fits in where. I think that's also very important just because Julian Sayin and Aaron Nolan are both part of the same class. Like, one of those guys is going to start at Ohio State eventually, and one of them is not. So how that all kind of sorts out will be interesting to see, because I think you're right. It paints a picture as to like what this thing could look like, 2-3 years in the future.
So let's play this out as if it was a real competition, or that Devin Brown or any of these other guys had a chance to go ahead and take hold. One, would it be a good thing if anyone other than Will Howard won the starting quarterback spot? Like, do you think that would help their chances of winning and doing the unthinkable this year? Oh, and two, who would you most want it to be?
I mean, I don't know if I think it helps their chances of winning necessarily this year, because I kind of like the idea of having like that veteran quarterback on a team that, like they're even saying, is championship or bust right now. So I think that matters. And I don't know. I mean, look, maybe Aaron Nolan blows everybody away and he ends up, he's so good that you wouldn't worry about it at all. And he would start just, this offense would just soar with him. But I don't know that I feel confident that a true freshman, whether it's him or Sayin, starting is going to be like the secret elixir to taking this team to a national championship, which is the expectation, obviously. So I don't know, like, I kind of feel like it has to be Howard this year, even if you don't win a championship, because he's just going to give you the best chance. But in terms of like how it kind of falls after that, I think I'm the most intrigued by Aaron Nolan. just like the dual threat ability. He seems like the next big thing. And I understand Sayin could be that guy as well. And Sayin seems like he's maybe not as mobile as a quarterback of what Nolan's going to be. But I don't know. Like that would be the guy I think I want to see the most. And it probably mostly just has a lot to do with, I haven't sat down and watched like his high school tape to know what he brings to the table fully, but just on like the scouting reports on him, I've read and seen, and just what people say about him. Because we've been hearing about him for several years now, I'm kind of enamored with this idea that he's the guy that takes the reins and becomes the next great quarterback at Ohio State, whatever it looks like after this year. So to me, it would be Aaron Noland if he sort of surprised people and rose up the depth chart and became like QB2 or something like that. That would be the cool thing for me to see.
Are you guys buying it's a legitimate quarterback competition in Columbus? Week 2 of practices rage on in Columbus under Ryan Day, and we do have an update on the running backs coach situation, including who's coaching them before they find their next running backs coach. That's next right here on Sons of the Shoe. But first, a quick word from our sponsors. As we get ready to break down week 2 of practices in Columbus for Ohio State, it should be noted they still have no running backs coach. We'll get to the traitorous Alford. I almost said Anthony Alford, our old coworker. No, it's Tony Alford, who's since gone to Michigan. But it should be noted, Ryan Day was talking today about the running backs coach search. He said the candidate pool has been excellent. I wouldn't expect him to say anything else. He also said he's coaching the running backs right now until Ohio State has a new running backs coach, but that special teams quality control coach Rob Keyes and senior analyst Tony Johnson are able to do some on-field coaching as the 10th assistant until Ohio State finds its new running backs coach. So it sure seems like there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen at the running back position, which I think probably helps stabilize that until they find the right guy.
Yeah, I don't have so much of a problem with that anyway. When I think like if there's a year where you're going to have that be a problem, it's this year, because you have two guys who in Judkins and Travion Henderson who are veteran running backs, right? Like they've seen a lot of things. They kind of understand the nuances of the position and what they need to do and their individual styles. I mean, the biggest thing is just like how they'll be utilized in a game plan, but that's where, Chip Kelly's mind comes in. That's where Ryan Day's mind comes in. I don't know that it's like the end all be all that you don't have a designated specifically running backs coach right now. Like I said, if it was a year where you had just a bunch of young guys who didn't have a lot of experience, I'd maybe be a little bit more worried. But I think right now it's probably a fine year to sort of transition out of that. Now, I think what's interesting about Alford, or if we want to call him Benedict Alford, I don't know if I mean it has a nice ring to it since it's an A name. But like when you see this, I understand the initial shock value of it, and yeah, maybe there's some trade secrets kind of going on there as he transitions to Michigan. But I do think in some respects, like, yeah, the rivalry is sacred and you try to avoid like losing coaches to the other team. But I can understand from his perspective where Michigan maybe seems like a chance to, I mean, he's got to be looking around and understanding like a lay of the land at Ohio State. I would imagine Ohio State has some sort of plans for Brian Hartline at some point. You got Chip Kelly, who you just brought in as an offensive coordinator. Like if he has any goal, and all I've heard is that he does want to be a head coach at some point. And, you throw in the fact that Ryan Day's there and he seems to be, I don't know if he has the complete job security, but if they go out and they perform this year, he'll be fine and he'll be here for years to come. So I'm sure he's looking around and sort of seeing, okay, where can I go where I can maybe get a chance to get more exposure and maybe actually rise up the ladder? And a place like Michigan with a first-year head coach that there's going to be a lot of questions and a lot of pressure on, And if you are sort of able to emerge out of that and find another job elsewhere or maybe rise up the ranks, I do understand from his perspective where he's coming from. But from the Ohio State fan perspective, the Ohio State fan to me is like, how dare you, curse you, you're dead to me. Why would you ever do this?
By the way, you realize you're riding the fence on this one. No, it's the fuck that guy. All right, listen, I'm empathetic to you're a careerist. I'm empathetic to, man, I've been here 9 years. I'm still just quote unquote the running backs coach, and I don't like that. It feels like that seems like the track that they're going to keep me on here. Totally understandable. Zero problem with that. Go anywhere other than Michigan.
That's fair.
And that's the bottom line. Listen, and here's the thing. Because I've even heard former Ohio State players being like, well, he's just a coach. He's not a player. And I'm like, that doesn't make it any better. It really doesn't. The whole point is, listen, if he went from Ohio State to running game coordinator at Cincinnati, and 3 years later ended up in Michigan, different. But he's going directly from Ohio State to Michigan, and then he has the balls to put out this lovey Ohio State fans, I'm always gonna remember. No, Hoss. All due respect, you're great at what you do. That total respect, all right? But you don't get to go to the arch rival of the team, but by the way, has beaten Ohio State 3 straight times. You don't get to go there for essentially a raise and then be like, man, my time in Columbus, I've been working on myself, and I just feel like this is the place where my chakras can be unleashed the most. No, blow it out your ass. All right, listen.
Well, okay, can I ask?
Join the evil empire, but act like a stormtrooper, motherfucker. Don't do this shit of, Ohio State fans, I heart you. Nah, you went to Michigan. Blow it out your ass. Act like a badass. Act like the man that you're going to be here, taking a raise to go to the arch rival.
So if Ohio State hadn't lost 3 straight to Michigan, if this was 3 years ago, would we be so? But if it had, though, if he had left 3 years ago, or if Ohio State had just won this past year, maybe, and kind of got things back on track against Michigan, would we be as up in arms about this as we are? I'm just curious. I'm genuinely
all right. So
curious.
This last year, I don't know. 1 year win, I don't know. But if it had happened 3 years ago, we would have laughed about it. The same way, and by the way, listen, I want to be honest with you. I'm a total hypocrite. I loved when Al Washington came here. I loved when Greg Madison came here. So I am totally just talking out both sides of my mouth. I don't care. There are certain things. Listen, you know me. I am about as down the line as it can be. There are certain things, though, that are sacred. For instance, if he had gone to Michigan to be the offensive coordinator, I would kind of get it. You know what I mean? I'd be like, well, I don't like that. Go bleep yourself. But you know what?
It's a lateral move.
Good luck in your career. But a lateral move in March. He make this move in January. He made this move in effing March. So no, it's the timing. It is the success Michigan's had. It's the fact that it's for a lateral move and a raise. And then I just want to say my 9 years in Columbus have been so fulfilling. No, if this was a promotion, if this was to any other team, if this was in January, anyone, or if Ohio State was still dominating Michigan, these are all 4 things that would have made this a little bit more palatable. But instead, all 4 things remain as they are. So I will say, take that, thank you, Ohio State fans, message and shove it all the way up your ass.
What's funny is when I knew we were going to have this conversation, I kind of pictured me being the one who was more, angry, and you being the one who was like, well, in all due respect, I don't know why I pictured
why
that.
Why are you using the self-help condescending voice against me now? Well, Spencer, here's the thing.
So I honestly thought it would be the opposite. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying I like it. I listen, as a diehard,
I'm going to need you to get off that fence,
well,
friend.
Hold on. As a diehard Red Sox fan, I used to hate as a kid when, Johnny Damon comes and helps you win a World Series in 2004. And then 2 years later, he's going and signing with the New York Yankees. Like, nothing used to piss me off more than these guys who would leave that team to go to the other team that's your biggest rival. And like you said, it was a sacred thing to me. I don't ever want to see that happen. No, like, absolutely not. The only reason I gave the context I gave was because when I saw this move happen, I too was curious, like, why is this happening in March? Why is this happening now? And then it kind of, as I did some digging on it, it made more sense as to, like, okay, he maybe sees like there's more of an opportunity for growth there versus where he is at Ohio State. I was just trying to give the context as to why it happened. That doesn't mean I like that it happened. And I too am going to from now on call him and refer to him as Benedict Alford, because that's what he is. And you can't do this, especially at this time of year. He's now got the trade secrets. He knows what Ohio State's, maybe not everything they were trying to do, but he waited. He didn't even leave when Bill O'Brien was brought in, and then ended up moving on. He left once Chip Kelly was brought in. So now he's been sitting in these meetings. He knows what Chip Kelly's going to try to do and all these different things. I don't like it. I don't like it one bit. And it might be enough. It might be enough to make me waver on the Michigan Panic Meter this week. We'll see next segment.
So real quick, I just want to point out that whole spiel about, he's feeling neglected, that whole spiel was to try and head off me hammering you for being a homer, and then, only to your surprise, to be out-homered, at which point you tried to out-homer me.
No.
Your competitiveness knows no bounds, German.
Strategically, I should have led with, this pisses me off, so that was my fault, and then got into the explanation of why.
You were afraid of the thunder. That's what it was.
I don't know. I don't know if it's just like trying to always explain the Deshaun Watson situation to people and where we should be with it, that I was like, you know what, it might be time to just like go into this one a little level-headed. I don't know what it is, but I did that backwards, and I apologize. Not a good move, and like I said, you'll find out next segment if it's enough to make me waver on the Michigan Panic.
So as Ryan Day mentioned, there is a wide net, an excellent pool of candidates for the running backs coaches. Now, it's interesting. There's Alabama's running backs coach, Robert Gillespie. There is former Ohio State Buckeye, now at Tennessee Tech, Pepe Pearson. Of course, there was Eddie George, also of Tennessee Tech, and Eddie has since come out and said he does not have any interest in the job, but that Pepe does. Then there is Tashard Choice, former NFL running back, now at Texas. What names am I missing real quick here?
I think I saw floated out there that Scotty Graham, Washington's running backs coach, could be in the running.
Scotty doesn't know.
You mentioned Tashard Choice. I think I saw Craig Johnson, Indiana's running back coach, is another one. But I think the names that you put out there, especially Pepe Pearson, is maybe one that makes like a ton of sense. Guy who obviously used to be a running backs coach at Ohio State. So there's the connection there. I do think, though, Craig Johnson makes some sense, too, from Indiana, because of the fact that Ryan Day has clearly made a point this offseason in bringing in guys with that NFL experience. Chip Kelly's one. Before Chip Kelly, Bill O'Brien was one. And that's something that Johnson also would bring to the table. So if that's something that he's really valuing this kind of hiring cycle, I could see why maybe that would be a viable option for them.
When I see Texas and Alabama's running backs coaches linked, I just think to myself, somebody's trying to get a raise. Outside of Tony Alford going from Columbus to Michigan, I don't see a lot of the blue blood kind of jumping here. So I would kind of be surprised, although if we had, I really like Tashard Choice, the player. So if Tashard became the running backs coach, I wouldn't hate that. I think what's interesting is, you look at the running backs coaches that Ohio State's had before Tony Alford, it was Stan Drayton. Ohio State has pretty much consistently, since Urban Meyer took over, had the best or second best or third best running backs coach in the game. And so this is not a criticism, but Pepe Pearson doesn't have that legacy yet. So it'll be interesting to see what Ryan Day pursues, because if Chip Kelly really is like, hey man, I'm just here to coach ball and I'm not in on recruiting or on recruiting as much as I normally would be, then it's probably more important that you get a guy who kind of joins you with the reputation Tony Alford did have, which has a absolute hound on the recruiting trail and then also can coach the position well.
So which player or which candidate do you think that is? Like, that's the best to sort of supplement the guy that you had before?
I mean, I think the problem is Craig Johnson is still relatively new to coming back to college football. So I don't know what, how like Pepe Pearson has been at Tennessee Tech, which is I think what Eddie's trying to do there is fun, but like they're not recruiting on the national level. And then the Washington, I don't even know kind of the backstory of Scotty Graham. So like, I mean, I guess if I had to say that, Robert Gillespie at Alabama probably asked to recruit his ass off to keep his job. At the same point, that feels like the least likely of all the candidates.
Yeah, I also think it's – I will say this. You talk about sort of having a legacy, whoever they bring in. Talk about a way to really set yourself up for that sort of reputation by coming in and taking over a running back group like we talked about at the beginning of the segment that features Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. Like, that's quite a who's who of running backs for you to come in and coach, which is why maybe that helps you lure somebody like I don't know, Gillespie away from Alabama potentially, because you have those two guys at the top of the room, and it's a chance to really establish yourself as like, okay, this guy coached those guys. Like, there's something to that. I don't know if that's for sure, but like if that's going to be the kicker. But even for some of the guys like Pepe Pearson or Craig Johnson or Tashard Choice, guys who maybe don't have that reputation yet, this would be a really good opportunity to kind of establish yourself with that, because you have two guys that are veterans that have already had a lot of success in this league. Not that the job takes care of itself. You still got to be a good coach and you still got to coach these guys up, but you kind of go in with that a foundation of knowing I got two really good running backs that are only going to help me improve my profile as a coach because they're so good. So that could be the thing that almost lures one of these guys away. So I think that's kind of interesting. How about I think more tongue-in-cheek, but how about Maurice Clarett throwing his name in the hat after calling out Ryan Day on social media last year? Only
if we get to see the videos of him in the building calling out Ryan Day. Like, just being like, you know what, you're a punk. You're a shitty coach.
You want like a Hard Knocks Ohio State.
But just of Maurice Clarett.
They're in the meeting room, and Ryan Day's just like, I've been where you guys have been. He's pulling a huge accent, basically.
Yeah. I just want him to be like, guys, I think we got to really I think we got to pass the ball a lot against Indiana this week. And Maurice is just like, I'll be honest with you, that's the dumbest damn thing I've ever heard. Like, I just want the full Clarett, as it were. All right, guys, in the comments, 92.3 The Fan YouTube channel, or at Nick Wilson says, at Spencito _ on social media, who is your preferred, AKA dream candidate for the Ohio State running backs coach position? We got one segment to get into. Is Spencer finally going to waver on his Michigan panic meter now that Tony Alford has left Ohio State for Ann Arbor? We'll find out next, but first, a quick word from our sponsors.
We are back, or maybe more so, I am back on Sons of the Shoe. Nick Wilson, dad duty called. He has to go take care of some family stuff. So he had to step away for the final segment of this first episode of the week. But I'm going to bring us on home. And we teased it. We talked about it. The departure of Tony Alford, or better, how I'm going to refer to him from now on as Benedict Alford. Is it enough to waver my thoughts on the Michigan panic meter, which to this point, Nick and I have been pretty much steadily in the dark gray, unbothered by Michigan whatsoever after their national championship run. Sharon Moore comes in. He's taken over the program, but we're not bothered by it. It's a first-year head coach. I will say, we finally have some movement on the Michigan panic meter. The changing of teams within the rivalry, Benedict Alford going from Ohio State to Michigan has me now going back into the light gray. I know maybe I'm being a little hyperbolic here. I know there's probably people who think this is not that big of a deal because it's a running back coach and all these different things. But the fact that he waited until March to make this move, the fact that he was in the building as Chip Kelly comes in and starts to implement what he wants to do offensively, and he started being in these meetings and learning about the game plans and things that Ohio State wants to do and what their plans are at quarterback and all these different things. He now comes to the table at Michigan with trade secrets. And that is not cool. That is absolutely not allowed. So the idea that he now has something that he can use within the rivalry and bring to the table. And that's the other thing is, like, he's been at Ohio State so long that he has trade secrets from years prior. He knows what makes Ryan Day tick. He knows what he's going to do in certain situations, even with Chip Kelly there to sort of be another mouth, another ear, and another brain trust behind this whole thing and the offense and what they're going to do and maybe when they're going to go for it, all this different stuff. I am definitely a little bit worried. Not enough to go into the scarlet, not enough to go into the white, but enough to get me out of the dark gray and into the light gray, because this stuff matters. I understand that there's always the old saying of, well, you might know what's coming, but you still got to stop it. Well, guess what? To this point, the last 3 years, Michigan has proven that they can stop it. And now you throw in the fact that you get a little extra insight from a guy who'd been in that building for as many years as he's been in that building, knows all these different ins and outs of Ryan Day and what's going to make him tick and what he's going to do in certain situations. That makes me a little bit nervous where I'm willing to move my meter out of the gray. I said I kind of rooted for this. So I did it to myself because I wanted something that was going to make this interesting down leading into the spring game, so that we weren't just going all spring and summer saying, I'm not worried about Michigan at all. We needed to spice up the Michigan panic meter a little bit and have some change. Well, we got it. We got the injection that we needed by Benedict Alford leaving and going to Michigan and leaving Ohio State holding the bag as he takes some private documents with him on the way out, and now gets to bring that with him to Michigan and give some insights into what Ohio State's going to do. I'm not saying it's the end of the world. That's why I'm only going into the light gray. Like I said, maybe it means nothing in the grand scheme of how the game goes next year, but just the thought and even the inkling that he could come to the table with some trade secrets is enough to make me waver out of the dark gray at least a little bit. So there you go. We finally have some movement on the Michigan panic meter. I'm going to the light gray. We'll have to stay tuned later in the week to see if Benedict Alford's departure has any impact on Nick's Michigan panic meter, but we'll save that for later in the week. In the meantime, guys, I want to get out of here by talking about the NFL draft and one specific Buckeye who we're all very excited to see play on Sundays, in Marvin Harrison Jr., because I don't know what's happening when it comes to – actually, I do know what's happening, and I'm going to walk you through it here. Because there's been this almost – I don't know what to call it. I guess sort of a parade of – or a wave of people lately, draft analysts, if you will, who, and maybe some of this insight's also coming from the NFL with leaks and sources and people putting stuff out there to media members that they're then sharing. But there seems to be this new wave that is suggesting that Malik Neighbors might be out of Washington, might be the first wide receiver off the board in the draft next month. And everyone just keeps citing, like, I don't see a weakness in his game. He's got a little something extra that Marvin Harrison Jr. maybe doesn't. And we might have jumped the gun and just blanketly naming Marvin Harrison Jr. the top receiver. And this falls in line with what I talked about a couple weeks ago. I think it was actually during the Combine week with Nick on this very show, where you had, I think it was Pro Football Focus put out their most valuable receivers in college this past season. And Malik Neighbors and Romeo Odunze were number one, or were the top two guys that they said value-wise in the college receivers coming out this year. And I was mind blown. And this is maybe where it all started for me. Mind blown at that notion when you think about the fact that I'm not, and this is nothing against those two guys, because I think Odunze is going to be a great receiver. I think Neighbors is going to be a great receiver as well. This is a very good wide receiver class, all things considered. But even the notion that they were more valuable to their teams and coming out of college than what Marvin Harrison Jr. was to Ohio State last year is asinine to me. I mean, the offense essentially was Kyle McCord, let's find Marvin Harrison Jr. wherever the hell he is on the field and make a play. There was moments where Travion Henderson stepped up and made some plays, especially late in the year. He started to sort of get back healthy and show you something. But for the most part, that their season revolved around getting the ball to Marvin Harrison Jr. And I don't know how you can watch his tape and find any weakness in his game. Like, there's no weakness in his game that anybody can really pinpoint and say, well, this is going to be a problem at the NFL level. And maybe that's also very true for Malik Neighbors. There's been a lot of good things said about him in the scouting reports, and I've watched some of his tape and what he's done well. And I understand why there's a lot of ranting and raving about him and why he's climbing up draft boards and why he's considered a higher prospect. And even in this conversation with Marvin Harrison Jr., I just can't wrap my mind around the idea that we're just trying to shortchange now Marvin Harrison Jr. because, well, it's draft season and we need something to talk about. Like, spare me the Marvin Harrison Jr. slander. And it's not even slander necessarily, but spare me the draft fodder that we love to do when it comes to this player. Marvin Harrison Jr., the day he enters the NFL, will be a top 10 receiver in football. Boom. Done. End of story. Malik Neighbors might get there too. He might be in that discussion as well. But if I'm a team drafting early on and I need a wide receiver, Marvin Harrison Jr. is wide receiver 1, and there's no debate about it. Now, why is this happening? I know why. It could be any number of things. One, we like things to talk about this time of year, and there's always something. Usually it's the quarterbacks. There's always like, well, this guy it was J.J. McCarthy a couple weeks ago when we talked about on this show. J.J. McCarthy, well, now he's climbing up draft boards and people feel like there's a lot of value there. And he might be actually a surprise quarterback pick in the first round that turns into something for some team. Okay, whatever. There's that. There's this idea that people like creating different stories and narratives. Sometimes it's even these sources from within the NFL put this information out there to try to get a guy to fall to them. So I don't know. Maybe somebody wants Marvin Harrison Jr. to fall to them. I have no idea. But whatever the case may be, I'm not reading into any of this. I'm not buying into any of this. It's all fluff. It's all draft fodder. It's what we like to do at this time of year. And I get that. I respect it. It's fun. It's part of the conversation. Fine. But I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this game and playing well, what about this guy? He might actually be wide receiver 1 over. I'm not doing it with this player. There are certain years where you just know there's a guy who's a generational talent and he's going to thrive at the next level. Myles Garrett coming to Cleveland in 2017. Andrew Luck when he was drafted. You go through history, there's always a couple here or there throughout the draft cycles that you know are just going to be generational players. Marvin Harrison Jr. is that. End of story, period. Don't need any other discussion about it. You take him number 1, and that's that. Not number 1 overall necessarily, but you take him as the first receiver off the board. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to do this thing where we try to just raise somebody else's stock and talk about, well, maybe we didn't look hard enough at Marvin Harrison Jr. No, we looked hard enough, and that guy is fucking good. All right? So don't overthink this. Just make the right decision. All right? And if Neighbors goes second, that's great. I think it's great that he's getting a lot of love. He deserves it. He's earned it. He is a very fine player in his own right. But I'm not going to sit here and at the expense of Marvin Harrison Jr. try to talk myself into circles on, well, maybe Malik Neighbors should actually go number 1. All right? I'm not doing it. It's ridiculous. Thank you guys for watching another episode of Sons of the Shoe in the books. I will encourage you to like, follow, subscribe, whatever you want to call it, to the podcast via the Odyssey app, on the 92 Through the Fan YouTube channel, in Apple Podcasts, especially Apple Podcasts. Did I mention Apple Podcasts? And you can also, as always, comment on the 92 Through the Fan YouTube channel as well. If you want to get involved, hit us up on X at Spencito_. You see my handle there if you're watching the video part of this, but also Nick at Nick Wilson says, if you disagree with any of our takes from today, maybe you don't think it's that big of a deal that Benedict Alford is going to Michigan, you can let us know. Any of those methods are possible, but we do appreciate you guys tuning on in. Be sure again to like, follow, subscribe to Sons of the Shoe, wherever you get your podcast, but especially at Apple Podcasts. Thank you guys. We'll be back with you later this week to recap and talk some more about spring practices, the latest murmurings of what's going on down in Columbus. We'll have you covered on it with the next episode of Sons of the Shoe. Until next time, and until then, go Bucks.